The power of Christ compels you. Was The Exorcist just a horror movie? It wasn't just a terrifying film. It was a production that erupted into chaos, rewrote studio rules, and rattled everyone who touched it. What audiences saw on screen looked controlled, measured, precise. What they didn't see were fires on set, collapsing rigs, real injuries, creative battles, and endings that were quietly reworked to change how the story felt. Today, you're getting 20 facts you probably didn't know about The Exorcist. Facts that live in the gap between what the camera captured and what the crew endured. And stay until the end, because the final fact reveals how the ending you think you know almost wasn't the ending at all. Watch closely, don't blink. Let's begin. The set burns down, but one room survives. The disaster hits early. A fire tears through the McNeel House set, destroying almost everything. Walls collapse, ceilings blacken, equipment melts. It isn't a scene. It isn't controlled. It's real. What survives is the bedroom where the exorcism scenes are filmed. Not coincidence, but a moment that instantly becomes legend. Production shuts down for weeks. Insurance reports pile up. Schedules shatter. When filming resumes, the surviving room feels different to the crew. Colder, heavier, harder to shake. What audiences don't know is that this fire delays the entire shoot and deepens the myth around the film before it's even finished. The movie doesn't just depict dread, it carries it forward from the set itself. The director demands real fear, not acting. William Friedkin doesn't want performance. He wants reaction, not staged emotion, but instinctive response. He fires loud sounds without warning. He keeps actors uninformed about sudden movements. He insists scenes stay unpredictable. This isn't chaos for chaos' sake. It's control through tension. Actors later explain that fear isn't always scripted. It's triggered. Dailies reveal expressions that can't be rehearsed. The camera captures genuine shock because the moment isn't anticipated. What audiences see as realism is actually discomfort shaped into art. The fear doesn't come from imagination, it comes from uncertainty, and that approach leaves a permanent mark on everyone involved. The freezing room is not a visual trick. The icy breath you see during the exorcism scenes isn't added later, it's real. Friedkin installs industrial cooling units to drop the temperature far below normal. The room becomes brutal. Hands stiffen. Breath burns. Actors wear minimal layers because the camera demands it. Lines are delivered through shivering jaws. Movement slows. Energy drains. Not comfort, but commitment. What audiences didn't know is that these scenes push endurance, not just emotion. The cold shapes posture. It changes voice. It adds weight to every movement. The environment itself becomes a performer, and it never lets anyone forget it's there. The exorcism dialogue is rewritten under pressure. The words spoken during the ritual don't arrive fully formed. They evolve, not through calm rewrites, but heated debate. Religious advisors, studio concerns, and Friedkin's instincts collide repeatedly. Lines are adjusted to feel grounded, authoritative, measured, nothing exaggerated, nothing theatrical. What audiences hear sounds timeless, but behind the scenes every phrase is weighed for impact and restraint. The goal isn't shock, it's credibility. Because Friedkin understands something crucial. If the language feels false, the illusion collapses. The tension lives in precision, and every word has to earn its place. Ellen Burstyn is injured during a take that stays in the film. One moment becomes infamous. A violent movement pulls her backward. The scream you hear is real, not simulated pain, but injury. The force is misjudged. The cable pulls too hard. Friedkin keeps the take, not cruelty, but belief that the raw moment carries truth. Burstyn later confirms the pain isn't acting, it's physical. What audiences don't realize is they're watching the exact instant where performance ends and reality intrudes. The line between film and life blurs, and the film never apologizes for it. Jason Miller is cast despite studio hesitation. The studio wants a safer choice, a bigger name, a proven draw. Friedkin refuses. Jason Miller isn't the obvious option. He's quiet, subtle, internal. But that's the point. The character isn't spectacle. He's doubt made human. What audiences didn't know is how fiercely Friedkin fights to protect this casting. Because Miller doesn't dominate scenes, he absorbs them. Not loud, but heavy. Not dramatic, but devastating. His restraint anchors the film, and without it, the entire balance shifts. The sound design unsettles even when nothing happens. Silence becomes a weapon. Friedkin layers subtle sounds, distant echoes, mechanical hums, environmental noise. Not music, but atmosphere. What audiences feel isn't explained, it's sensed. The sound design creates tension even in stillness, even in empty rooms. What you don't consciously notice shapes your reaction. The unease arrives before the image does. It isn't fear built through action, it's dread built through space. And it follows you long after the scene ends. The camera movement breaks horror rules. Most horror films rush. The Exorcist waits. The camera moves deliberately. It observes instead of chasing. Friedkin avoids flashy tricks. He lets moments breathe. What audiences didn't realize is how radical this feels in context. The stillness makes every disruption land harder. Not constant chaos, but controlled pressure. Not speed, but inevitability. The horror doesn't jump. It advances. And that pacing becomes one of the film's most copied and misunderstood elements. Practical effects push beyond comfort. Nothing here is lightweight. Everything has weight, texture, resistance. Effects are built to be interacted with, not admired. Props respond physically. Surfaces react. The illusion holds because it isn't fragile. What audiences don't know is how many rehearsals revolve around safety rather than spectacle. Each movement is calculated, each setup tested repeatedly. The danger doesn't disappear, but it's managed, and that tension between risk and control gives the film its edge. The mid-film pace shift is intentional and risky. Here's where things change. The film slows when audiences expect escalation. Scenes linger, conversations stretch, studios worry, test screenings react unevenly. Friedkin holds firm. And this is where I'll say it. Go ahead and like and subscribe because moments like this are why behind-the-scenes facts matter. This choice reshapes how horror works. The delay intensifies everything that follows. The calm becomes unbearable. What seems like restraint is actually pressure building silently, and when release finally comes, it feels earned. The medical sequences ground the impossible. These scenes aren't there to shock. They're there to anchor reality. The procedures are filmed clinically, almost coldly. No dramatic lighting, no cinematic flourishes, just harsh brightness, mechanical sounds, and methodical movement. William Friedkin insists on accuracy, consulting real medical references and insisting the sequences feel routine rather than sensational. He understands something crucial. Before an audience can accept the impossible, they must first trust the ordinary. What audiences didn't know is how deliberately these moments are paced. They slow the film down. They strip away mystery. They suggest logic, science, and control. And once that foundation is built, disbelief collapses completely. The ordinary becomes the doorway. When the film later crosses it, the impact feels devastating because reality has already been established as real. The staircase becomes an unplanned icon. The location isn't designed as a symbol. It becomes one. The steep stone staircase appears quietly, repeatedly, almost incidentally. Characters pass by it, walk alongside it, descend it without ceremony. No music signals its importance. No dialogue highlights it. And yet, over time, when it begins to carry weight, what audiences didn't know is that this visual motif isn't planned on paper. It emerges organically through repetition and framing. The steps come to represent transition, descent, and consequence, not through explanation, but through presence. The film trusts viewers to feel meaning rather than be told what it is. That trust creates resonance. By the end, the staircase isn't just a location, it's emotional geography, and its impact lingers long after the final frame. Max von Sydow's performance is built on stillness. He doesn't dominate scenes. He occupies them. Max von Sydow approaches the role with restraint so disciplined it almost disappears. He moves minimally. He speaks with precision. He conserves energy like someone who understands the cost of every action. This isn't weakness. It's authority earned through control. What audiences don't realize is how difficult this approach is. Restraint becomes the performance. Every pause carries intention. Every look communicates history. Von Sydow never competes with chaos on screen. He balances it. His calm steadiness creates contrast, making the surrounding turmoil feel heavier, more unstable. In a film full of escalation, his stillness becomes an anchor. And that quiet presence is what makes the confrontation feel earned rather than theatrical. The lighting evolves with the story. Early scenes feel open, neutral, balanced. Rooms are evenly lit. Spaces feel familiar, safe. But as the story progresses, shadows begin to creep in. Contrast sharpens, corners darken, light becomes directional instead of welcoming. This shift isn't accidental, it's narrative language. What audiences don't consciously register still affects them deeply. The lighting changes mirror the emotional tightening of the story. Comfort erodes, certainty fades. The frame itself begins to feel confined. Walls close in. Faces are half seen instead of fully revealed. Light stops reassuring and starts interrogating. By the time the film reaches its final stretch, the world feels visually compressed. The environment no longer offers refuge. It reflects collapse. And that transformation happens quietly, one shadow at a time. The score is used sparingly on purpose. Music doesn't guide emotion here. It interrupts it. William Friedkin avoids using score as a constant emotional cue. He understands that constant music dulls impact, so instead he waits. Long stretches pass in silence or with only environmental sound. When music finally appears, it feels deliberate, minimal, unsettling. What audiences didn't know is how intentional this restraint is. Silence does the heavy lifting. It allows tension to breathe, to stretch, to become uncomfortable. And when sound returns, it feels intrusive, almost wrong, like something breaking into a space where it doesn't belong. That imbalance stays with you. The music doesn't comfort, it destabilizes. It reminds you that control has slipped, and once it does, it never fully comes back. Test audiences react more intensely than expected. Early screenings don't go quietly. Viewers walk out shaken. Some sit in silence afterward. Reactions are strong and divided. Some praise the restraint and realism. Others feel overwhelmed by the atmosphere alone. The studio grows nervous. Conversations begin about softening certain moments, adjusting tone, making it more accessible. Friedkin refuses. He doesn't dilute the experience. He sharpens it. What audiences eventually see is a version that refuses compromise, a film that trusts its choices instead of smoothing them out. What audiences didn't know is how close this decision comes to changing the film's identity. That refusal becomes part of its legacy. The intensity isn't an accident, it's protected, and that protection cements The Exorcist as something uncompromising and unforgettable. The film changes industry conversations. After release, boundaries shift in ways the industry doesn't immediately recognize. Studios begin to understand that restraint can be more powerful than excess, not louder effects, but quieter confidence. Atmosphere becomes currency. Tension becomes craft. The ripple effect spreads far beyond horror, influencing dramas, thrillers, and even mainstream storytelling. Filmmakers start trusting silence, pacing, and implication instead of constant escalation. What The Exorcist does isn't loud innovation. It's quiet recalibration. It proves that control can unsettle more deeply than spectacle, and that audiences will follow when treated seriously. What emerges is a new respect for tone as narrative force. The industry absorbs the lesson slowly, but it never fully resets to what it was before. The performances age differently than expected. Years pass, effects date, technology advances, but the performances hold. Why? Because they're grounded in human reaction, not trend. What audiences didn't know is how intentionally timeless these choices are. No contemporary mannerisms, no fleeting style. The film doesn't chase relevance, it builds durability. The final confrontation isn't about spectacle, it's about choice. Not volume, but decision. Not chaos, but consequence. The climax avoids excess. It leans inward. What audiences feel isn't triumph, it's cost. The resolution doesn't celebrate, it reflects. And that tonal choice defines the film's maturity. The ending exists in multiple versions, and meaning shifts. Here's the quiet secret. The ending isn't fixed. Different cuts emphasize different emotions. Some versions extend moments, others pull back sooner. The difference isn't plot, it's feeling. Hope becomes ambiguous. Closure softens, or sharpens. What audiences don't realize is how slight changes reshape interpretation. The film doesn't tell you what to feel. It leaves space, and that space is where its legacy lives. The Exorcist doesn't endure because it frightens. It endures because it respects tension, restraint, and consequence. Behind every frame is a decision made under pressure. Behind every moment is a human cost, and that's why it still holds power. If you want more stories hiding behind iconic films, subscribe and remember this tagline: the scariest thing on screen is often what happened just off camera.